Yeah, folks, I think we have two really potentially crazy strong cards landing in the month of February. A few others I think could see some significant play. So potentially a big season here as we visit the Guardians of the Galaxy with some new looks for old names like Star-Lord and Drax, some other new characters introduced as well, and some big time effects. So I'm going to go through each of these cards, discuss them in great detail, and rate each of them from 1 to 4 stars. Kicking things off here with, spoiler alert, a 4-star card. This is Star-Lord, Master of the Sun, the new Season Pass card. And he is a 4/5 with, on reveal, next turn, you get +1 energy for each turn you've ended with unspent energy. This gains that much power. So a couple things happening here. Number one, Star-Lord, Master of the Sun is getting bigger, and you're getting extra energy, which is a really nice combo. I think you're very often going to get like a 4/8, a 4/9 that's giving you 3 or 4 extra energy when you play this index to support it, which is, that's an incredible result, right? That's actually just kind of amazing. So, you know, the most obvious example or use case of this might be something like a Haivo deck where you're already looking to float energy. You've got that Hulk in hand, so you skip turn 1. On turn 2, you play like a Misty Knight or a Sunspot. You float 1 energy. That's your unspent energy. You don't have to skip the whole turn or anything. Just leave yourself 1 unspent energy. That's all you need. You know, turn 3, you play a 2-drop, Bruce Banner or something. Turn 4, even, you play your Cyclops in your Haivo deck. Turn 5 is when you would play your Star-Lord, Master of the Sun. He would then have 5 turns with unspent energy when this rolls into turn 6. And I do believe it would count the turn you play him as well, because it's like next turn. So it would be looking backwards at that stage. So in essence, he would be a 4/10 that gave you 5 extra energy on your final turn, which is 11 energy in a normal game. You know, magic adding from there. Alternatively, a different line for a Haivo deck, of course, is playing this on turn 4, so that you get a bunch of extra energy on turn 5, which you could then float that energy, maybe scale your Sunspot, perhaps more importantly, discount your She-Hulk, enable your Infinite, whatever you want to do, right? Skipping turn 5 while also aligning with a card like Warlock, for instance, could allow you to chain even more crazy discounts, although Warlock, of course, is a 3-drop, so you might not want to play a 3-drop right before your Star-Lord. There's a little bit of, you know, how does all that shake out? If you have a Cyclops, you know, you're pushing this to turn 5, so it's like, you know, if you want your Cyclops going off, that is. So a little bit of jostling there, perhaps, from like cards and priorities and how your turns line out. But in essence, the end result, I think, ultimately is just a lot is happening. You get, I think, at the end of the day, a really solidly statted card. Even if this came down as a 4/7, I'm not mad that I get a 4/7 that gives me 2 extra energy. You're already like close to Wiccan, right? And Wiccan requires like really strict deck building in some cases, and you know, is a little bit more conditional, whereas this one just works. Like, yes, Wiccan gives you 2 extra energy on 2 turns, but hey, a 4/7 that gives me 2 extra energy once, still a card I'm not mad about, right? So in other words, I think the floor on this is pretty solid and the ceiling's pretty crazy, and I don't think you necessarily have to do Haivo stuff. There could, number one, be kind of variations of other unspent energy decks I think could come together with this card and some other stuff we're going to see, I guess, next in the video. But could this even maybe just be like an on reveal synergy? Like, my God, you know, double this on reveal, and suddenly it's like, oh my God, there's some cheese possible there, because this is getting a ton of stats and a ton of energy for some kind of crazy Wong combo where I give myself, you know, a Black Panther Arnim Zola final turn because I've enabled it via Wong and Star-Lord. And like, I don't know, I start thinking about stuff like that too, right? There's all kinds of wackiness that can happen with this. So I think crazy combo potential, obvious use case with Haivo decks, maybe even a decent card that just like goes into a mid-range deck, a Zabu deck or something, where it's like, hey, I float energy sometimes, I'm gonna miss an energy here or there, Star-Lord helps me recover that, I'm suddenly a really happy guy. So in other words, I think this card's actually really good. Some obvious decks, maybe some play outside of that, a lot of potential because it does so many things. This one looks quite strong to me. All right, moving on here to Magus. I think this one's the like super premium pass, whatever it's called, the next level here. He is a 3/5, which has an activate effect here that's also going to deal with unspent energy. This one reads, copy the text of a character in your deck with cost equal to your unspent energy. And an important parenthetical there, without using its on reveal. So basically here, if you say skip your turn 5, if you activate Magus on turn 5, he's going to say, hey, you wasted 5 energy here. I'm going to copy the effect of a 5-drop in my deck, which, ideally might be something like an Iron Man, for instance. I'm like, hey, I'll take a 3/5 Iron Man. Yes, that's super sick. That would be an incredible result. If it copies a White Tiger, though, it's not going to work. The on reveal will not go off with Magus because I guess he already revealed. He would still copy the text, so if you like Grandmastered or Odin'd him or something, yes, technically that would work, but they very specifically turned off on reveals with this card. And I think the reason is probably Mr. Negative. I think they didn't want you to have a really easy way to hit a Mr. Negative on turn 4, where it's like, hey, if I play this on 3 and I haven't drawn my Mr. Negative yet, Magus can really reliably hit Mr. Negative. You just skip turn 4, activate, this becomes your Mr. Negative, which is an awesome result, right? Or alternatively, if you have Mr. Negative, you just play it, and then like maybe this becomes your Jane Foster. I think that's probably why they had to give this parentheses here to turn off on reveals, because it would just be too broken with Mr. Negative. The problem is, I think it hurts the card a little too much otherwise, because like, yeah, Iron Man's a great hit, but what if you already drew your Iron Man? It has to be in your deck. It's not in deck or hand, right? It has to be in the deck. So if you already draw your Iron Man, okay, you're screwed. Like, okay, I play the Iron Man on turn 5, sure, like, yeah, okay, I've got something to do at least, but like now your Magus is just like sitting there dead as a 3/5. So do you have a second 5-drop in the deck? Okay, I put Claw in the deck to make up for that, so now I'm safer. Well, number 1, you might also draw your Claw. Number 2, you might have both in the deck and hit Claw instead of Iron Man, and then you're sad again, right? So on top of that, it's like, well, am I skipping exactly turn 5 always? Are there other scenarios where I might want to skip a different amount? Is there some other card that's given a location that's giving me extra energy or something? Like, so many things can go weird and wacky and awry that it's like using this as a combo enabler of sorts, where you're like doing something really broken and specific. It just seems too hard to me. I don't think it's going to work. It's just too much of a deck building challenge. Like, game states just don't always line up that well. I will also just say, like, as an activate card, this kind of has to hit on turn 3. It's often going to be way worse later. Does this fit into a high evo deck? I don't really think so. They don't really have 5-drops, number 1, that they're playing much, and it's like, well, does this become like a Cyclops or something sometimes because I floated 3? It's like, it could, but then not that good, right? You need to cheat something big and something probably with, small power values to really make this feel like it's scaled up in an unfair way, which would make it a viable and competitive card. Otherwise, it's just opportunity cost you have to overcome. I'd just rather run another 3-drop that just does something better for me or more reliable, not to mention like it's competing already in some ways with like Warlock, other 3 costs in the high evo package. Even Star-Lord in a way kind of competes with 3 drops in the high evo package, although I guess you could play this on turn 4 while floating 1 and then activate it on turn 5 while playing your... No, that doesn't really work either, right? Playing your Star-Lord. Like, they don't even really go together, see? So it's like, I just don't know, man. It's like there are definitely targets, but not having on reveals makes it weird. It's kind of cool in theory that it is this like safety net where it's like, like the Mr. Negative example, right? It's like, well, if I don't draw my Mr. Negative, I can find it. If I draw my Mr. Negative, I don't need the Magus, right? And same thing with Iron Man, right? Like, okay, well, I'm going to get an Iron Man no matter what, but how often is that good and how easy is it to float energy for those scenarios? It's just all weird, really challenging to work with. I feel like this card either needs to be cheaper or have like a premium stat line or something to just get it sit there, because I'm having trouble imagining use cases for this one. I think it's just going to backfire and fail far too often, and that on reveal restriction is just really tough for this one to overcome. All right, moving on here to Moondragon. This is a 2/2 end of turn +2 power if you played 1 card this turn and spent all of your energy. So we're going the other way now. Now we want to make sure we're playing things out perfectly on curve every single turn. I'm playing a 2-drop, a 3-drop, a 4-drop, a 5-drop, a 6-drop, and if so, then Moondragon actually becomes pretty darn big. That's actually 5 turns of +2 power, because she is going to count her own turn too, right? She's going to be kind of a 2/4 automatically anytime you play this on turn 2, which in total makes her a 2/12, which is actually really nice. It's a big output for a 2-drop. Even if you did miss a turn or 2, I think, getting this to 2/8 or something is not remotely challenging for the decks that it's built for. And 2/8's pretty nice. That's actually rather competitive. So a couple ways you could go with this. We just played that Doom 2099 deck, which kind of wants to do the same thing, wants to play 1 card per turn. It doesn't care about the max energy being utilized, but you often want to anyway. So that's playing a 4-drop on 4, a 5-drop on 5, like an Iron Man or a Blue Marvel, and a 6-drop on 6, like a Dr. Doom or a Spectrum. I actually think you could totally toss Moondragon into that deck rather easily, and it's probably going to be at least a 2/8 when played on turn 2, like we talked about, and very often, could get even bigger than that. Probably really, I guess, if I think about it, very often a 2/10, because you might only really miss turn 3, and that's not even that challenging to hit either. So, even though it's not an ongoing, like, it probably still makes sense just because, it fits the game plan so well, and it's so many free points. I also think, of course, you could go different directions for this as well. Probably not something like a Wiccan deck that also cares about, filling out turns really nicely, because at the end, this would stop doing its thing. By the time you play the Wiccan, suddenly it's like, well, I'm playing 2 cards per turn pretty much always because I have all this extra energy. So even though that's a curve deck at the first half of the game, the kind of second half would exclude Moondragon, making a lot of sense. But I also think there are just kind of like big decks where you play this on 2, you play, a Luna Snow on 3, you play a Blink on turn 4 or whatever. At that point, it might be a little more awkward because, you got a 6-drop on 5, but then turn 6 is maybe you got a Fin Fang Foom that fills in nicely, but you might miss a gap here or there. But still, if you, like I said, if you get 4 turns out of this, it's still really nice. And those big decks do sometimes need those cheap little filler bodies. Chamber serves that nicely. Moondragon could be an option there as well. So I could see some kind of ramp deck just playing 1 big guy per turn, utilizing Moondragon to great effect. Even stuff like War Machine decks kind of do that sometimes too, right? So a few different angles here for Moondragon. The big question mark on this one, of course, is how bad is this if you don't play it on turn 2? Any turn after turn 2, this does look like a pretty darn weak card, because even if you like squeeze it in on turn 4 or whatever, she's not going to usually go off. Well, she's definitely not going to go off on turn 4. Unless she somehow got hit by a couple Icemen or whatever. But, you weave her out with another 2-drop on turn 4, you've missed on her effects, then you'd only have like turn 5 or 6, and is it going to be worth it? And will the decks playing that perfectly for curve even have the moment to slot her in? Because it's like, well, I've already got this deck that wants to play a 4, a 5, a 6. There's no space for Moondragon to come in late. So a little bit of downside risk there. I actually think it's going to be okay, though. I think that she will power through that, and it's like, well, we missed our window. That's fine. The games she hits, she's nuts. Games we miss, like, yeah, we didn't have time for her anyway, so it's not a big loss. Not a sack. I'm not like forced to play a 2/2 or something to fill in my turn. I just got other things to do. So I think Moondragon will be pretty solid in that instance and has a few decks here where she makes sense. And, getting a 2/10, 2/12 down is indeed a very powerful play that doesn't really require a ton of conditionality here for Moondragon. All right, so next up here is Drax, Avatar of Life. This is a new 3/4 with end of turn plus 3 power if your opponent played a card with greater power this turn. Then move to that card if you'd be winning its location. So if you play down Drax as a 3/4 on turn 3, if your opponent plays a 3/5, like Magus, for instance, then Drax will check that at the end of the turn. He'll jump up to a 3/7, and if the condition is met, he will move over to Magus's location. So do keep in mind those are 2 separate things. I think even if they played the Magus in the same location as Drax, he will still gain the power, just he won't have any reason to move. It's not that he has to move in order to gain the power, so the opponent can't like avoid it by just playing into Drax's spot. But that means you already have a 3/7, which, by the way, that's a great stat line. If nothing else ever happened, I actually think Drax would be kind of okay. I think a 3/7's a good 3-drop stat line. That's like gladiator space. But then if the opponent plays another card on a future turn that's bigger than 7 power, it's now checking against 7, not 4, of course, because Drax has gained some power. Then he gets to go again and become a 3/10. So, if they played a gladiator, 8-power gladiator for whatever reason, Drax gets to go again, becomes a 3/10. After you get to 3/10, there's going to be a lot of decks that don't necessarily beat Drax again. They could slam a Fin Fang Foom, Gladiator, or Galactus First Steps, or whatever, right? There are ways for him to jump up to 3/13. I think that will be rarer. I think, maybe 1 in 5 games. He's a 3/13, maybe even less than that. I think in a lot of games, though, Drax could definitely be a 3/10 if played down sufficiently early on turn 3. I think almost every game, honestly, Drax is going to be a 3/7. It's hard for decks to not play a card bigger than 4 power. And I think that's a really great floor. I think a 3/7, even if he only moves once, you don't care, you just delete that sentence from the card maybe. Still pretty good baseline of power, particularly if you got like Surfer or something else that cares about the power, right? So other ways that's advantageous. So I think a 3/7 90% of the time with that occasional scaling upside is actually really nice. And then you get the move aspect, which could also be really valuable. You know, that could give you access to a flip late in the game where you just, you know, moving around to this giant card. Could create some little mind games too between both you and your opponent. Things could kind of backfire depending on whether you think they're going to play a bigger card or not, which I haven't even really puzzled all that out myself. I don't know if that's an advantage or disadvantage for Drax. We'll have to probably see it in action to really understand all the nuances of those decisions, but it's definitely going to shake things up a little bit here. I think in many cases, like moving power to where they played power is probably a good thing because you expect to flip it back, but it definitely could backfire and might make it hard for you. But if you just kind of like stack up Drax's spot and then, well, that could be an overcommitment too, though. So I don't know. We'll have to see how that all shakes out. But at the end of the day, power is power. And I think a 3/7 with upside basically is kind of how I'm seeing this. I think it's going to be 3/7 so often. I think that's good. I think that's a really nice card. There's also technically some move synergies and stuff here we could talk about. Throw this into a Kraven deck, Miles Morales, etc. Right? It's actually kind of got some cross synergy there. I don't know if it makes the cut in the move deck. Those packages seem kind of tight, but I don't know. I don't hate it in like a Hydra Stomper Kraven deck where it gets an extra hit here or there, right? And that's kind of a neat idea too. So all in all, a card with a few different angles and some big number promise. All right, next up here, we've got Kraglin. This is a 3/3 with on reveal, banish the top card of your deck if it was 4 cost or higher, +2 energy next turn. Otherwise, give this +4 power. So a couple directions to take this card. Number one, maybe stuff it in a big deck with lots of big cards. You hit a big 6-drop off the banish. You go into turn 4 with 6 energy, and your deck's running a bunch of big stuff, so you're thrilled to have 6 energy on turn 4. It's kind of like a wave of sorts that doesn't enable your opponent. You can cheat out your 6-drop early. Maybe that's Galactus sometime. I don't know. That's kind of a funny idea, right? Maybe it's just another big 6 to set up for the Arnim Zolid or whatever, right? Alternatively, you could actually run this by design in a small deck. For instance, this could just be a 3/7 in a Silver Surfer deck where it's basically guaranteed to never hit a 4-cost card, or literally guaranteed if you don't want it to be. You don't have to put big cards in your deck, but basically say, hey, I just like a 3/7, right? And I don't mind banishing cards. On average, that's actually basically like doing nothing. The odds of drawing that specific card on average, you know, is basically the same as being on the bottom of your deck. You never really know where your cards are going to be. Like, yes, occasionally you might hit a Surfer. 9 times out of 10 you won't, whatever, right? I guess maybe is it actually literally 10 times out of 11? I don't know, whatever. The math is what the math it is. But, you know, I think that's a risk you'd be willing to take in many cases, just to have like a 3/7 in your deck. It's a 3/7 basically with downside that you control, as opposed to bigger 3-drops, you know, Gladiator, for instance, 3/8. That's a downside risk you don't very easily control. So it's like, well, maybe I'd just rather have a Kraglin. I don't know if that's the direction you go with Kraglin, but I don't think it's crazy. To me, like, the problem right now is more that these like 3-drop stat sticks like a Kraglin, kind of even like Drax a little bit, although he can get big enough to maybe escape that, is they are just competing against like crazy stuff like Captain Carters and Shaws and all these things that get buffed and scaled so much that sometimes just power in its own right might not quite be enough. So then I'm thinking again about like Kraglin in bigger decks, and you know, suddenly it's like, well, is that an angle to go? Can I use this in a ramp deck instead of like my Luna Snow or my Electro or whatever? I do think it's kind of weird that it leaves you with a gap on turn 5 again, right? Like Luna and Electro have that smooth 3, 5, 6, or sometimes 7 curve. Kraglin would have kind of a 3, 6, 5 curve, which Blink and stuff doesn't play as nicely into. So you might have to go a slightly different direction with deck construction for Kraglin to make sense in those bigger decks. So I also think, like, could you just toss this in a deck that's happy to have either? Just kind of like, hey, it's a 3-drop. If it's a big guy, okay, cool, I just play some bigger stuff. If it's a little guy, it's like, okay, I got a 3/7. That's probably okay. But sometimes cards that are good in 2 directions aren't good enough to carve out that one spot, because like the more specialist style stuff is just good at doing exactly what you want it to do. And Kraglin maybe like falls into no man's land where it's not good enough really at either thing, and just everybody excludes it. And that's a little bit of my fear for this card. So it's like, I don't hate it. I do kind of wonder if it's going to make a spot for itself, though. Moving on to Jack Flag. This is a 3/3 With ongoing, your cards here with increased power have +2 power. And I am not worried about this card making a spot for itself because I think this card's actually crazy strong. This ongoing, basically great for an ongoing deck. It's just absolutely perfect for an ongoing deck because Spectrum is clearly going to give all your cards +2 power, which means you just get to stack insane amounts of power on stuff like your Captain Carter, for instance. Like, hey, Spectrum's buffing Carter, so is Jack Flag buffing Carter. That's buffing something else. I've got 8 billion power in this one spot thanks to Jack Flag just stacking up buffs. You've also got stuff like Captain America. We saw this working. Like, just this and a Captain America is actually nuts because Jack Flag also buffs himself. It doesn't say your other cards here. So Jack Flag just becomes a 3/7 when you play him next to Captain America, right? And then if you Spectrum those, Cap himself will also become a 3/7 because he'd be buffed 2 by Spectrum and then another 2 by Jack Flag, and Jack Flag becomes a 9. That's 16 power with 2 cards and a Spectrum buff, right? Not including everything else. And then, like in the reveal video, we saw also like Sam Wilson, you know, that's a card that gets buffed really easily. And then the shield that gets buffed by Spectrum gets buffed again by Jack Flag. You just create all these chains of buffs, and like the numbers just start flying when you stack all of that together. Of course, it doesn't have to be ongoing either. Lots of other decks buff their cards in a variety of different ways. Silver Surfer, like we just talked about. If all of your cards are 3-drops, Silver Surfer increases their power. Jack Flag just stacks it up again. Same story. You could honestly have Captain America, Captain Carter, all these things coming together once more. But basically, any deck with green numbers, which a lot of them have. Hey, what about a Zoo deck with Gilgamesh and Blue Marvel and Kazar? Toss this in. All your 1-drops that got buffed by Kazar, guess what? They're getting buffed again thanks to Jack Flag. So basically, just a lot of ways to play this. There's so many green numbers in Marvel Snap right now. Jack Flag seems like he could go in a variety of different shells, and I think he puts out a lot of power. Basically, kind of 11 power very often because it's like 2, 2, 2, and 2 plus the 3 of himself because he can buff himself again, remind you. So like a 3/11, but also one that, you know, scales with any other buffing stuff. As soon as he gives that power to Captain Carter, you're kind of tripling down on that upside, right? So in essence, I think this card just looks really strong. I think he puts out crazy good numbers for decks that put out crazy good numbers, and he's really cheap in doing so. I think that means he's going to get played a lot. Moving on here to Major Victory. This is a 3/4 with on reveal. Add 2 members of the Guardians crew to your hand, and we were told the eligible Guardians crew members are basically the classic versions of Star-Lord, Rocket, Groot, Drax, Gamora, and Mantis. Basically all the ones like, you know, if your opponent played a card here this turn, do a thing. You know, solid cards. Certainly like the cheap ones in particular might be super easy to flex in, you know, just throw in a Star-Lord or a Rocket. Stuff like Mantis, probably not super excited about. Gamora, you know, arguably could be a little too expensive, even Drax sometimes. But do give you a natural curve follow-up, I guess. The question, though, of course, is like, well, why am I spending 3 mana to just run cards I could already run? You know, it's like, it is nice that it's a narrower pool as compared to something like, you know, Agent Coulson, where it's just any random pile of things. So, you know, maybe good in like Sanctum Showdown if it's not banned or whatever, right? Some really specific use cases there. But in a regular Marvel Snap game, most decks just don't need a bunch of Guardians in hand. Obviously, just having cards in hand can be valuable. Devil Dino style decks, Victoria Hand style decks. Is this going to be worth it, though? Like, aren't there just better ways to generate cards? Like, maybe it's a little better than Coulson, but it's not like Coulson's getting played. It's not like Devil Dino decks are really getting played. So where does this land? You know, I just don't think it's any notably better than anything else, or just doesn't jump out at me. So fun card to play with. You know, we'll have some good times with this one, I'm sure. Do some silly Airsham stuff, Victoria Hand stuff, whatever. But I just don't think one that's going to make a really big impact on the meta. I think the stat line would have to be notably higher to base for Major Victory to feel like it really stands out from Coulson. And in some cases, might even be worse because you're not even getting like the guaranteed curve stuff. So ultimately, rather underwhelming card. Moving on here to Starhawk. This is a 2/2 with on reveal. On odd turns, give your cards at the left location +1 power. On even turns, give to the right location. So a fun little odd and even referencing card here. So basically, if you were to play this on turn 2, that's an even turn. you'd be buffing cards at the right location with 1 power. Probably wouldn't want to do that because you probably wouldn't really have any cards. Maybe you'd have like a 1-drop there and then Starhawk itself, right? You could get like a +2 buff on turn 2. That would make this a 2/4 in total output. That'd be incredibly disappointing. You probably want to save this till later in the game when you have multiple cards in a given spot. Maybe you stack up your right location with a bunch of stuff that values buffs, Captain Carter, etc. The Scarlet Spider, my classic go-to examples. Then you slam Starhawk on turn 6, buff all of those things that care a lot about the buffs. Then, you know, you got major power off Carter. You got your copied Scarlet Spider being slightly bigger. But that's the issue, right? Is like, at the end of the day, it's only 1 extra power or 4 total for that given location, which makes this a 2/6 in total base output that, again, can scale a little. But, man, compared to all the crazy buffs we have these days, this just does not feel like it scales nearly enough. You know, even with like on reveal doubling, it still doesn't really scale that favorably either. Compared to Shulao, I'm just like, what the heck am I supposed to do with this? Also, just maybe sometimes a little weird to like weave it into a turn even, right? Like waiting until the right moments and stuff. Might be hard to line this one up. So this again just looks really awkward to use to me. You know, timing on it's weird, output on it's low. This feels like one of those cards. It's like a series 4 they're gonna put in a game mode that people are gonna get and then really not be able to utilize at all because it kind of sucks. I think this could at least be a 2/3. I don't know. Something has to happen, I think, to make this card remotely viable. And there you go. That wraps it up for the discussion portion of the video. Now let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 4 stars, starting with the best and moving to the worst. Jack Flag is a 4-star card. Star-Lord, Master of the Sun is a 4-star card. Moondragon is a 3-star card. Drax, Avatar of Life is a 3-star card. Kraglin is a 3-star card. Magus is a 2-star card. Major Victory is a 2-star card. Starhawk is a 1-star card. And yeah, that wraps it up. Man, real like feast and famine today. A couple cards I think are going to be fantastic with Star-Lord and Jack Flag. Some pretty solid workable stuff with Moondragon, Drax. Kraglin kind of would have been a 2.5-star card if that was the thing I had. I gave him the slight bump because, yeah, you know, I like both sides of it. But some real stinkers too. I think Magus is going to be super tough to use. I think Major Victory just doesn't really have a home, you know. No, he's not terrible, but just like no reason to run it. And Starhawk, this just looks bad to me. I don't know. I'm thinking like, man, Nova's better than this card. That's what I'm thinking right now. It's like, do I just like this better than Nova? Some on reveal synergies doesn't require, you know, it's a second piece like Nova, but still, I just think it's going to be tough to use this one. I hope somebody figures it out. But anyway, still some big fun stuff to play with. I like decks like Moondragon a lot too. So it could be an exciting month to experiment with combos like Star-Lord and Jack Flag. So anyway, share your thoughts on these cards down below. Thanks much as always for watching, and I guess I will see you around.